Good day, everyone. I am Archie Isabel A. Soriano, and today I will talk about the conference presentation. So when we say conference presentation, it is more on a meeting which is organized on a particular subject together with the people who have common interest. So it is an opportunity for people like authors to get known and to identify potential collaborators. So examples are the most common, which is the research conference presentation or any academic conference presentation. So let's talk about the preparation. So the presentation of research results at a conference is an important method for engaging with the research community of peers. So each conference will have a technical committee responsible for the assessment of papers submitted for presentation at the conference. So this is done in the time frame between 6 months or 1 year before the conference is held. Then, the presenter will be required to use a computer set of images called slides projected using a digital projector. So the most common files used in conference presentations are the Microsoft Word PowerPoint, which is the .pptx files, or another one is the Adobe or the PDF files. So conferences are organized and run with the speakers given strict time limits for the presentation. So for example, if a presentation is scheduled to last 30 minutes, it is recommended to prepare a 25-minute discussion of your presentation and allow at least 5 minutes for the question. Then, each conference session is chaired by a person who's responsible for the timely presentation of the papers allocated to the session. So they are the one who is somewhat responsible and making sure that your session or the session run on time. Next, each speaker is allocated a time slot. So this includes the start time, the presentation end time, and the question time. So this information is well known before the conference, and it must be followed precisely by both the speakers and the session chairs. So here, the structure of the presentation should follow the structural outline of a scientific or engineering paper. So here are some general presentation rules or guidelines. First, the presenter should never plan to present slides more rapidly than one slide each minute. So a presentation like paspas ra imong pagka-present, this makes it too difficult for the audience to follow. Second, every slide should be clearly numbered. So this allows an audience to indicate which slide is to be discussed during the question time. Next, the number of words on each slide should be less than 50 and the text should be broken up into fewer than 8 bullet points. So don't try to put so much information into your slides. Presentation, ang imuhang PowerPoint kay lugos na makita, kay daghan kay imong information gibutang sa imuhang PowerPoint. 4. Animated images must be checked on the computer and the display used at the conference venue. So there are many compatibility problems with different computers and projection facilities. 5. Reference must be included in the presentation at the end of the talk because this serves as a full reference and or relevant slide as the name and date only. So all sources you use to create your presentation should be credited. 6. Slide colors are very important for clarity. The presenter should choose a background with a light neutral color and clearly contrasting letters and equations. So preferably, the auditorium or the lecture theater should remain well lit so that audience members can take notes, and other factors that dark environment is somewhat conductive to sleep, so it should be avoided. Last, the font type and font size must be chosen for clarity. So this means that a font size of greater 20 point should be used. Kaya if mubutang ka og below 20, gamay kaayo, so ikaw ray makakita. The speaker, ray makakita. So the rest, your audience or even your session chair, maglisod og sabot kung unsay inyo imuhang gibutang sa imuhang presentation. So, we have here the example, presentation timing. So, a talk is scheduled for 10 minutes presentation time with 5 minutes for change over to the next speaker. So, the total slide count for this time allocation should be a maximum of 13 slides as follows. The first slide is the title slide and will require little explanation apart from acknowledging the co-authors of the paper. So the final 2 slides will be a thank you and a list of references and acknowledgements. So these 2 slides will not require verbal comments during the presentation. Thus, the presentation must be delivered in full introduction, theory, research methods, and results in 10 slides. So assuming a maximum of 2 figures in 1 slide, the schedule should be something like this. First, the introduction consists of 1 slide, the theory 1 to 2 slides, experimental method 1 to 2 slides, your results 3 to 5 slides, and the discussion and conclusion 1 slide. So it is important to ensure your timing when presenting at a conference. So if you have 10 minutes to present, then prepare 10 minutes of material, then no more. Because if you don't practice your timing, you may not get a chance to highlight your findings and your recommendation. So we go to the delivery of your presentation at the conference. So before the day of the presentation, the speaker should run through the presentation out loud, alone, or in a small group to ensure that all concepts can be clearly explained and talk can be delivered in the time allocated. So it gives the speaker the opportunity to form sentences. So this is often overlooked when reading the presentation slides. So below are the methods to minimize stage fright for speakers. First, rehearse the talk a number of times before the event with and without an audience. So rehearsal is essential to speaking well because it will help you to keep your time limit. Next, memorize the first 2 sentences that will be spoken. So this allows the speaker to start without being too hesitant. And third, use hand note cards. So this is an insurance policy. So using hand notes can be used to rescue the speaker from his or her nervousness. However, we have here introduced in the Microsoft PowerPoint that allows the speaker to see notes next to the slides on a monitor without being revealed to the audience. So this can be a replacement for using hand note cards. Fourth, make sure each slide has a requirement for the speaker to explain something more than the written text. Because if you are just reading the screen, usually audience will get boring or your listeners will get boring. 5. Do not commence speaking to the presentation until the title slide appears on the screen and the chairperson of the session has introduced you. So the chairperson brings the speaker closer to the audience by introducing them warmly. So next, conferences are usually organized with a timetable schedule that allows the speaker in session to load their presentations from a memory stick or the USB thumb drive, and to ensure that they open correctly. So to avoid mistakes, it is best to name each file with the presenter's name rather than the conference name, because there will be many presentations loaded on the same computer that is being used. So it is best to name each file. Next, speakers are not permitted to use their own computers as technical faults can arise and this can cause delays. So this should happen before the session starts, usually during a coffee break or a lunch break. So it is important that the session chairs know that all speakers have arrived and have successfully loaded their presentations into the computer, because this is also a confirmation that the speakers are in correct room and at the correct time. So during the delivery of the talk, the speaker should face the audience. So you, as a speaker, you should aim for direct eye contact with your audience, with a number of people, and every now and then glance at the whole audience while you are speaking. So example, reading directly from the screen. So imagine a setting where an audience member raises their hand and mentions that she can't read the slides. So in this case, the presenter may graciously tell her that they will be reading the slides directly to her. So as the presenter proceeds to do so, they look up at the screen and each of the slides is filled in with the text of their speech. So the problem here is that the presenter is not needed if the slides provide all the information for the audience members. So ways to answer this one is to simplify the content. So presenter can keep the most important information near the top of the slides for easy reading in the back rows. So they can also focus on one topic area and use no more than 8 bullet points per slide. So it is important for presenters to speak to the audience, not only to the screen. So the sound level should be judged by imagining that the presenter is talking to the people seated in the back row of the audience, because this should ensure that the voice projection is adequate. So the presenter should attempt to speak slowly in short, simple sentences. So this is because as that might not be the native language for many members of the audience rather. So the explanation of the screen should be done verbally and preferably spontaneous. So for example, you are talking without looking your hand notes. Then, when presenting graphs, the axes must be mentioned before commenting on the data in the graph. So graphs are an excellent way to make a visual representation of your data that have been collected. So the axis must be mentioned so it can be understood by people without having to ask what it represents. So when presenting equations, both sides of the equation should be explained verbally and the important symbols defined. So Here, chairs are responsible for the overall planning and execution of their session and to facilitate the session's success. So I presented is the chair's responsibilities, a rough guide, the roles of the session chair at a technical conference. So first, before the day of the session, so read the papers in your session because this will give you the required deep understanding and allow you to ask relevant questions aside from the audiences. So next, before the session starts, meet the speakers and assist with presentation loading, the projection equipment, pointer, and etc. Then before the talk, introduce yourself, your name and affirmation only, and start the session on time. So introduce each speaker at the appointed time, like you should learn to correct the name pronunciation. Then during the talk, indicate to the speaker when there are 2 to 3 minutes to go. So usually by fingers in air, politely stop the speaker when their time has expired. Also, as a session chair, assist the speaker if problems arise with AV, internal noises, or etc. And then after the talk, thank the speaker. So if there's time, seek questions from the audience or ask questions of the speaker to ensure that there is no silence or dead air during the Q&A time. Then at the end of the session, of course, thank all the speakers and audience, and then presented are the speaker's responsibilities. So the role of the speaker at a technical conference. So before the day of the session, prepare the presentation. So the purpose of preparation is to ensure that you know your audience and the space in which you will be presenting. Next, before the session starts, introduce yourself to the session chair before the session starts. Like for example, good morning, my name is Archie Isabel Soriano and I am here today to talk to you about gender issues. So ensure that the presentation is loaded and is error-free and readily available. So during the talk, briefly introduce yourself and your co-authors. So thank the session chair for your introduction. So you should, as a speaker, you should speak clearly and loudly, like speaking to the back row in the room. And then finish your talk by clearly stating thank you to indicate that you've finished your presentation. And then after the talk, wait for the session chair to call for questions. So answer the questions directly and concisely. And then last, after the session, return to your seat and wait for the session to finish. So be prepared to stay after the session for further discussion of your papers. So the talk must have a clear, defined end slide. Should invite questions if time permits. Next, the speaker should not invite questions. It is because this is the role of the chair of the session only. So you as a speaker should not invite questions to your audience. Next, the speaker must not exceed the time limit for the talk. So to talk beyond the allocated time is somewhat rude and offensive to the chair who has the responsibility to stop the speaker on time. So along to the following speakers also, and of course, the audience. So we have here an example of the firm session chair. So a session chair had a challenge with one speaker. So 3 minutes before the scheduled end of the presentation, the chair seated in the front row facing the speaker indicated that there were 3 minutes to finish. So at the scheduled finish time, the chair waved politely for the speaker to stop. So the speaker did not. After 2 minutes into the questions or the changeover time, the chair stood up and moved close to the speaker. So the speaker continued the presentation. After another minute, the chair put his hand on the speaker's shoulder and spoke into the microphone and said thank you. The next speaker was introduced. The verbose speaker was forced to stop without questions and without finishing. So novice and experienced presenters must not speak beyond their time allocation. So in this example, as what I've said earlier, the speakers have their strict time limits for their presentation. So going over time limits is very disrespectful to other presenters, your organizers, and also to your audience. So it is a privilege enough to have their attention, whether it's for 30 minutes or 5 hours or whatever, then you should not abuse it. So this ends my presentation, and I hope you've learned something about a conference presentation. Thank you.